Ms. Rooney, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Rooney. I'm president of Agricultural Council of California. Ag Council represents farmer-owned cooperatives throughout the state of California. We represent approximately 15,000 farmer owners and about $9 billion in sales. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. Some of our members are food processing entities that will have to participate in cap and trade. Food processors, including cooperatives and farmer-owned businesses, can easily meet the 25,000 metric ton threshold of CO2 emissions when cleaning or cooking or processing foods. California agriculture's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions are relatively small when compared to other industries in the economy. It accounts for approximately 6% of the state's total emissions, and when you add food processing to it, in our estimate, that's roughly another 1%. So we're looking at approximately 7% in total emissions from our industries generated in the state. It's also interesting to note that in June 2010, Stanford found that high-yield agriculture actually slows the pace of global warming. They had a report that they released June 14th that said, and I quote, "The advances in high-yield agriculture over the latter part of the 20th century have prevented massive amounts of greenhouse gases from entering the atmosphere, the equivalent of 590 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide," end quote. That said, Ag Council's members regularly seek ways to improve the environment. Beyond any sort of regulatory requirements, most of the major food buyers around the world demand it, and it's also just the right thing to do. As such, many of our members have the most efficient boilers and equipment available to meet those goals, regardless of the status of cap and trade. Are we perfect? No, we're not at zero emissions. Are there things we can improve upon? Absolutely. But at this time, there's many limitations to overcome, which may be decreased with the investment of cap and trade revenues. Ag Council agrees with Chairman Nichols' comments at the end of March to the Senate Select Committee on the Environment, Economy, and Climate Change that these funds should be invested in furtherance of the goals outlined by AB 32. In fact, building partnerships with entities already participating in the CAP to further reduce emissions should be the top priority. For food processors in the San Joaquin Air District, many of these activities in the AB 32 regulation to reduce emissions are already incorporated into the routine operation of the plants. These activities include boiler blowdown, water preheating, and other related activities. The industry has a void in cost-effective newer technologies to truly reduce emissions. Partnerships through cost-share grants or rebates on next-generation technologies could further incentivize emissions reductions. Many food processors operate on a minimal profit margin for their products, and these grants or rebates could assist in minimizing the economic constraints in the investment in improved emissions technologies and renewable energy. For example, one of our members evaluated a boiler replacement system that would generate superheated steam utilizing solar technology. This system would use solar power to fire the boilers instead of natural gas. Therefore, their emissions would actually be reduced to zero. For the steam required that would be needed for the height of the processing season, the investment cost would be $50 million. This estimate is more than 5 times their annual company-wide capital expenditure budget, meaning if they made the investment, they couldn't make any further improvements to any of their plants for the next 5 years, and simply cost prohibitive. However, that said, making that technology cost-effective could be one of the transformative technologies that ARB makes available to our industry. Additionally, agriculture can be an important source of renewable energy in the state. Through investments in cap and trade revenues, producers and processors can overcome barriers to installing projects such as those in the bioenergy arena that can generate combined heat and power from processing waste, such as nutshells and wine grape pumice. These types of projects can potentially be created at both the farm level and at the processing plants. The second criteria for consideration should be timing of the investments. In order for food processors to achieve the necessary reductions to meet AB 32 goals by the year 2020, the sooner the investments could be made, the better. Many of these projects take several months, if not years, to get the necessary plans drawn and permits approved to complete the projects. Investments in our industry early in the program could assist ARB and the legislature with its overall goal of getting to 1990 emissions levels by the year 2020. Ag Council's top concern with this regulation is cost and the availability of allowances as the year 2020 approaches. With limited technology and fewer allowances on the market over time, achieving goals set within the regulation become almost unrealistic for our industry. But with proper investment of the funds, mutual goals could be achieved of keeping costs down and achieving emissions reductions. Thank you for your time today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
First Dee Dee and then Dan.
Okay, this would be a question for Emily, Dan, and Barry with respect to investments in R&D. Any suggestions that you would have with respect to advancing technologies? I'm trying to avoid a situation where it's a big black hole for research and tightening the criteria so that we focus on research projects that will quickly get us to new technologies so that we can keep some of the jobs in California with respect to some of the capped sectors.
In order to sort of avoid leakage, we really need to reduce costs of the regulation, and at least for the food processing industry, I see that in two different areas. One is simply to reduce emissions so that food processors do not have to purchase allowances on the market, and the other would be through potentially energy efficiency projects. So in both of doing the research and development, like Dan had stated, in both of those areas would probably be the best bang for the buck. In the example I used on the solar-powered boilers, that would reduce that company's emissions immediately to zero if they could simply afford it. And if we could somehow develop it in a way that it is cost-effective for the industry, then we can employ that on a greater scale. And then in the other arena, it would just be energy efficiency projects, whether it's solar power, that sort of thing.
Dan.